Hello, welcome to James's pre-fight, post-fight MMA show, where we recap all the important things happening in the sport of MMA, and I, your host James, try to explain to you what's going on in the sport and make it as easy as 1, 2, 3 for you to understand. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Fans Assemble. I'm your host, James, and, we're here for another year of fights. 2022 was, pretty good, some ups and some downs, but most importantly, me and my co-host, Mike, who's here to join me today, I believe we got most of our picks right throughout 2022, the fights that we covered, and hopefully we can get some similar momentum for 2023. We're going to talk about the first card coming January 14th on ESPN Plus, Gastelum versus Imavov. It's a pretty good card. Mike and I were just talking about it. A lot of big names trying to, make sure that they stick their relevancy in contendership. But nonetheless, it's going to be great action, in my opinion, anyways. Taking place in Vegas in the Apex, and we've just been starving for fights. That's pretty much all I could say. So we have three big fights to talk about on the card. Of course, as I do, I pick which ones I think will be the most intrigue. So the first fight on the card is going to be Umar Nurmagomedov versus Barcelos. Excuse me. A very interesting fight actually, because I actually I always thought that Umar is a very interesting. He comes from Team Eagle MMA. He's the younger cousin of Khabib. I always thought his striking is very, very good. Obviously his wrestling is very good, his grappling, and which should be interesting to see because Hani Barcelos is very good striking. Uh, Barcelos has very good wrestling. He's a part of the Brazilian national team, and when it comes to freestyle wrestling, so they're kind of even in that way. Umar much younger than Barcelos, where you have Umar is 27 years old, Barcelos is 35, and then you have the records, which is very impressive from Umar, 15-0, 17-3 for Barcelos, which is also very impressive. Umar Nurmagomedov is going to have a 69-inch reach, with Barcelos having a 67-inch reach, and Umar, like I said, he's 15-0, so he's never lost a fight. And then Barcelos, he's coming off of he's won one fight out of his last three. Granted, the competition he's fought, like are much better than Umar. Like one thing I will say is Umar, he's ranked kind of high, like he's ranked like around 10 to 12 range, and he hasn't actually fought a ranked opponent. So this is going to be a big fight because even though Barcelo's not ranked, he's very, very good. Like I said, very well rounded, very young, and has a very big upside when it comes to this bantamweight division, which is very stacked. But Barcelos seems like he could have possible answers coming into this fight. So, Mike, what did you see when we talked to when you first looked at this fight? What was your feel for this?
Well, I think the first thing that stands out, the difference, in age and experience,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost. I think also there's the factor of Vegas. Obviously, Nurmagomedov is heavily favored to win this fight. And
Yeah,
obviously,
very
there's
heavy.
also the third piece would be the factor of the Russian momentum
Mm-hmm.
that's going around. And, you know, it definitely is an interesting fight. I mean, obviously, there's the whole, like I said, with the Russian fighters and the name and all that. But putting that aside, I think there's a really interesting contrast between these fighters that I think creates an interesting story in this fight. I do think that Barcelos has a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that he's someone you can write out of this fight. I would agree that he is, a strong underdog going in, but I think he has a pathway to victory in finding a way. And this is kind of going to be a theme, not just for this fight, but the other ones in a way we're gonna cover. But defense is gonna be really important in this fight. You've got to try and keep yourself up, and if you can keep yourself up, I think he has a chance to outstrike and
Mm-hmm.
potentially create a pathway to win the fight. Like I said, I think that's kind of a reach in a sense. It's not something I think is a likely outcome, but the pathway is there, and I do think that the fight, as a result, has a little bit of suspense to it. I think we need to stop necessarily just writing guys off and take it for what it is, and I'll call balls and strikes, and that's what I see being a possibility.
Hmm.
But I think in this one, it's really just can Nurmagomedov win it on the mat, and then I think he just needs to take it to victory and win it by decision, nothing risky, nothing overly pretty,
Uh-huh.
and he could just get it done his way and simple as.
Yeah, I 100% I agree with you. The aspect you said, like, pretty much he has to make sure there's like no risk involved. And then I do agree, like, there's a little bit of writing, there's a tiny bit of writing on the wall. Like, this could be a little bit more difficult of a fight than what the odds makers are saying, right? Like, Umar is like some spots he's like over minus 600 to win this fight, 600 favorite. And like I said, Barcelos, he does have very good wrestling. We haven't seen it tested so much when it comes to defensive wrestling. Like, he's known for his good offensive wrestling, and he has accolades when it comes to grappling with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and his wrestling in the Brazilian national team. But I do think that you make a good point. Like, I think Umar, he's very good at managing risk, and basically that's all he kind of has to do is manage risk. Because Barcelos, I think I agree. Like, I don't know, maybe he will try to take down Umar, but I do think that right. You think his path to victory is definitely on the feet, right, Barcelos?
Yeah, I think it's just defensive. I think if he tries to go offensive on the ground, he's going to definitely lose.
Keep it standing.
He needs to keep it standing, right? And like that involves defense. It's going to involve getting out of the ground, getting off the ground,
Hmm.
getting keep not only keep himself up, but also getting himself up when he's down.
Hmm.
So obviously, any mat-based strengths he has are going to have to come out. But if he tries to be offensive, going down, I think he's going to end up losing the fight. No,
Yeah, he's
very
gonna
easy.
waste his time. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to lose.
So I agree with you. I'm gonna go. So you're leaning towards Nurmagomedov, right?
Yeah, I think by decision. I know like
Yeah, I think so
he
too.
did have some submission wins recently, so I think that's there. I think that's a possibility, but I don't like it in this fight. But I think
Yeah,
it's
because
there. I'm gonna go with decision, unanimous decision, but the submission risk is there.
I agree with you. I think the decision is probably more likely because, even though he has good subs, like some guys he's fought who are not as good on the ground as Barcelos, he's had to go to decision with. So I do lean towards that path of victory for him. And like I said, I think we're gonna see Umar. He's gonna be all the way out kicking, or he's gonna be all the way in trying to wrestle at least, or get it, wrestle on the cage. And I think we're gonna see. This is the possible fight where people. I don't think it's gonna be like, oh my goodness, like Nurmagomedov or everybody. Aljamain Sterling has to watch out for him. I do think this is the fight though where people start to see like, oh, this guy's a little bit of a dual threat. Like, you get frustrated on the feet, and then if you get frustrated, you lash out. He'll take you down. So that's how I see this going. And I agree with you, Mike. I think the momentum's huge, and I think the youth, right? I think their age. Do you think the age will take a big play, or like in terms of like athleticism, or
Yeah,
like
I
in
think
tenacity?
I think it's a factor that probably gives Nurmagomedov an edge. It was my first point that I made. I think it is the factor, and I think youth is the strength here. Um,
Hmm.
but I think, like you said, at least you know what you're gonna get if you're Barcelos. You know what you're gonna get from Nurmagomedov, and it's just a matter of if you have the physical ability to match it. And you know, like I said, odds are he won't
The
have all
young
the
guy.
answers.
Hmm.
I'm just curious if Nurmagomedov comes out early and like tries to get a sub. Like if we see him like go for like a first round sub,
Yeah,
if he takes the
but
chance with it, that's what I'm curious to see. Like, and I think that like, but other than that, I think you know,
yeah, I see the same way. Like, is he gonna take a risk and everything, right? So that's So we're basically on the same page with this. Like, he's probably gonna win, but let's see how far he could take it with a very interesting opponent. So going on to the co-main event, me and Mike were just talking about it. Damon Jackson versus Dan Ige. A little bit slightly a strange fight to make because Dan Ige, he was this guy who actually I knew him because Habib used to have all these vlogs, and then Dan Ige would always be there for some reason. And that's how most people knew him. And then you find out, oh, he's actually a UFC fighter. And he had a couple main events, a couple 5-round fights, a couple co-main events, another one right here. But he's coming off of 3 losses, right? He's I believe he lost to the Korean Zombie. He lost to Josh Emmett. 2 guys, no slouches, of course. Both of them, the Korean Zombies fought for the UFC title twice, and Josh Emmett will be fighting for an interim title in February. And then he lost to Movsar Evloev, who a lot of people say is very, very good. Another guy who comes from the country, from the Dagestan region. And but this is a pretty big step down, in my opinion, Damon Jackson. Not that Jackson's not good. It's just he's a little bit he's never been that hard in the rankings, not that embedded in the rankings. Very well rounded, he's very wiry, has good jiu-jitsu, good striking. And Dan Ige is very well rounded as well. Ige 15-6, 31 years old, 5'6", 71-inch reach. He's coming off of 3 losses. And then Damon Jackson's 22-4, 34 years old, 5'9", also with a 71-inch reach. And he is coming on, I believe he's like on a 5-fight win streak, which is very impressive. I think his last win was over Danny Savage. His last one, I think he won by first round KO. So he's coming off a lot of momentum. It's going to be interesting to see because this is a very big step up for Jackson. But like you always tell me, right? Like the momentum always plays a huge part in these type of fights. So what do you think, Mike? What did you see going into this one? I'm curious because this fight's a little interesting, right? Competition, momentum, things like that. I think that's even more prevalent in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you have 2 guys obviously on a total different pathway. I mean, thing is, Ige lost his last 3 fights by decision. He had the knockout win over Tucker. And then you go back to his, another decision loss. And David Jackson's just been winning fights by decision. And now you go back, his only recent loss was to Topuria, first round knockout. I mean, you can't really blame him there.
Yeah, Topuria is he's undefeated. He's mulling
Man
over.
is an absolute stud. So I don't think you could be too mad at him there for getting knocked out in the first round. But I do find it interesting because you're in that position where, Ige hasn't been finished in a very long time. You have to go back to I believe 2018. I don't think so. I don't even think Ige's been finished in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. You might have to fact check me on that, but I don't think he has.
Yeah, he's hard to finish. I know what you mean. Like his last couple of losses, he's shown how tough he is.
Right. So Damon Jackson's been a guy who's on a hot streak. He's been finishing a lot of fights, but I think now he's going to be in a position where he can't do that as easily. Mm-hmm. And that creates a dynamic, I think, that almost in a way favors Ige.
I checked for you, Mike. He's never been finished ever.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I wasn't sure.
Support your claim even more.
Ige was a Dana White Contender Series.
Yes.
Fighter as well, and a lot of those guys have been doing very well recently. If you're superstitious, but
of course, yes, put it in the betting line. Yeah,
you can add it on. As a if you're a superstitious person, it's an extra thing. But I think it's a matter of how does Damon Jackson respond to adversity in a fight, and maybe he's a little more untested in that regard. Whereas, like when you lose on decision, right? If you're Ige, you're kind of undergoing, like, you can go back to it and pick it apart much more and realize, okay, what slight things can I do different? Whereas I think, it's a similar pathway for Ige to win this fight. Like I said, he's just got to be better defensively. He's got to be efficient striking. And I think it's going to be a very close fight. But I'm just going to go with Ige. I think he's got a better experience and a better resume, even if he is losing. Mm-hmm. I see him bouncing back. I think he'll win by decision, but I think he'll win.
I think so too. I think him and Jackson well rounded. We've seen him sub, we've seen him get decisions, and he has he shows that he's very mean in there when it comes to striking. But I agree with you. I think the experience of Ige, and then he's very well rounded. Right? Like he has decent wrestling, jiu-jitsu's pretty good. Striking is sometimes not the best, but it's definitely reliable. I think exactly what you said. I think he just has to outwork Jackson and then just stay safe, which I think what you said it probably makes more sense. Just make sure you don't get caught up in like a crazy sub or end up on the bottom on a takedown or something like that. I think it's pretty cut and clear of like as of that because Jackson, we've seen he hasn't Ige he hasn't really lost to anybody of the no offense to Jackson, but if David Jackson were to win, this would be his biggest win by far. I think you would agree with that. And then Dan Ige, right? This would be probably one of the hardest losses. He's not Jackson is no like Cater or Zombie things like that. So that's how I see it. So I kind of agree with you. It's kind of cut and dry for both of us, I think, in that aspect. So we both have Dan Ige via decision. So moving on to the main event, the crown jewel of this card, as we like to say in Kansas Assemble, we have Nasruddin Imavov of he originates from Dagestan, but then he grew up, I believe, and trains in Paris, France, with former interim champion Cyril Gahn, and he's fighting perennial contender at two weight classes before now middleweight, Kelvin Gastelum.
Hey everybody, so I don't know if you've heard the news, but actually the main event has changed. It's no longer Nasruddin Imavov versus Kelvin Gastelum, so we're making an emergency podcast recording. Sean Strickland, who I believe is ranked number 6 in the middleweight division, has decided to sub in for Kelvin Gastelum, and now he's fighting Nasruddin Imavov, which is a completely different fight, As someone who's always watched Imavov's career very, very closely, this is a very different type of style because, just read the tail of the tape, right? And Sean Strickland's 25-5, 31 years old, 6'1", so he is a bit taller than Kelvin Gastelum's 5'9", with a 76-inch reach, but he's coming off of 2 losses. And Nasruddin Imavov is 12-3, 27 years old, 6'3", so he is a bit taller, 75-inch reach, and he's basically only lost one fight in the UFC. Very different fight for Imavov, right? Gastelum is a southpaw lefty, 5'9", so it does make the striking very, very different. I'm sure he was thinking Kelvin Gastelum would have to close the distance on him, and now Sean Strickland is a guy who has a lot of volume. Something Imavov is going to have to watch out for. It is being held in a 205-pound weight division, which makes things very different. That probably means Sean Strickland could not make the weight for middleweight, most likely, which should be a interesting dynamic because that may mean that he's not in the best shape. As Strickland, he even said himself that he still continues to surprise himself how he was able to make the welterweight limit. Also, we had the question of Nasruddin Imavov. He did start to slow down towards the end of his fight with his last fight in Paris against Joaquin Buckley. I think that but that's like the only fight we've ever really seen him get tired in. So in Imavov, typically he's the guy who's turning it up towards the end of the fight. He's the guy who shows great cardio. I personally think it was just because him and Buckley had so much emotion going into that fight. He tried to finish him multiple times in the first round. I think that's probably the reason. So I'm sure Sean Strickland is probably the line is a little bit closer than the Kelvin Gastelum one. But me and Mike were talking about it. Mike's unfortunately not going to be able to join me right now. But we were saying that Imavov, we're probably leaning towards him. It's hard to explain how this fight's going to go, right? Strickland with all the volume, but he doesn't really, he has the same speed. He doesn't really throw leg kicks or body punches. Most of his strikes are always to the head. Nasruddin Imavov is very light on his feet. And the things me and Mike were discussing is maybe the key for Imavov and why we're going to lean towards him because he has very good feints, which we've seen against Derek Cannonier. That Sean Strickland, he commits so much to his defense, the way he like If you throw a kick, all of his energy will go into defending that kick. If you throw a punch, all of his energy will be going into defending that punch. And when you're feinting well, when you're throwing combinations, when you're not expecting every single strike you throw to land, then that's when he gives him trouble, right? That's why he started backing up a lot against Cannonier. That's why he started getting hit by Cannonier towards the end. And I think Nasruddin, he's gonna have to do that, which is typically just the way he fights, right? A lot of feints, a lot of setups, good kicks. I think he's gonna have to have the game plan of not letting Sean Strickland go forward, or he has to have the game plan that he has to either stay all the way out with his kicks, with his jab, which is very good. And Sean Strickland has a great jab too, but when you go jab for jab and you start to throw in kicks in there, especially kicks to the body and the leg, with Strickland, he does defend with both his hands, which just leave him open to certain strikes. Then I think that would be the key for Imavov. Also, one thing is Strickland, he does have good wrestling defense, but typically they're always against guys who just wrestle, like Hermanson, for example. And Imavov, he's more like he strikes, but he does have good wrestling, good grappling. And so his game plan should be Imavov is to stay all the way out with his kicks, feint, try to get Sean Strickland backing up, and then when he comes close, use your clinch, use your wrestling. Imavov is the better striker in the clinch. He does land big shots, like big elbows, big knees. That's something we haven't really seen Sean Strickland deal with. Like good guys who strike in the clinch very well. And we don't typically see Sean Strickland even fight guys who are very well rounded. Like Strickland, he's very good at that boxing range where he'll defend in the pocket, he'll get guys missing, things like that. But he hasn't really fought anybody who has all the options of taking it to the mat, taking it against the fence in the clinch, feinting, using his kicks very well. To me, Nasruddin basically just has to keep his cool, keep the game plan, expect to miss early, do not go head hunting, mix it up. Basically what he usually does in all his fights. So that's basically going to be the key for him. Sean Strickland, he kind of does what he usually does in all his fights, and I expect him not to change really. It is a short notice fight. Maybe he does come out a little bit harder. He thought he won his fight against Jared Cannonier, so perhaps he'll come out even harder, putting on a big pace. But Imavov does have multiple ways to dissipate that, we think. It's a very close fight. It's a very interesting fight. It's a harder fight in terms of ranking wise. It is a little bit more simplistic of a matchup though for Imavov. Like Kelvin Gastelum has good power, also has high volume boxing, also has good wrestling. So, but basically Nasruddin can't let Sean Strickland's rhythm go on for too long, and it's going to be difficult with the short notice camp. But we do think that the possibility of Sean Strickland not being in the best shape. Nasruddin does have similar things that you would want to beat someone like Sean Strickland, like the feints and the kicking ability and the range. That we think that Nasruddin Imavov could. We're leaning toward. Me and Mike are both leaning towards Imavov to win this fight. Very very close fight. Should be an interesting one. You got Imavov who's so well rounded, has a lot of great skills, and Sean Strickland. He only fights one way, but his one way he does it very well. So, very interesting fight. Please like, comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our podcasting platforms. Please give us a review there. Please, really helps out to make a better product and to get out faster. So thank you guys for listening. Sorry, apologies for the late change up, but that's how it goes in this business. So thank you all, and goodbye, and hope to see you all next time. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you were listening to, please subscribe to Fans Assemble. And if you can, please give us a rating. Do it for the audio world. They need you.